It is nearly cut-down day. 53-man rosters have to be made. The San Francisco 49ers have their final game against the Raiders. And what are the social media antics with Brandon Ayuk? Me and Brian Peacock will discuss that and more right after this. Welcome, everybody. Let's go Niners. My name is Jason Aponte. I'm Jason Aponte. That's Brian Peacock. Welcome into Peacock and Aponte. But for the first time, like, we're getting into preseason form, right? Like we're getting into regular season form. So before we get into anything, Brian, how are you, man? Oh, I think you're muted.
Let me see. I was going to say I'm in mid-season form, but I'm not. I didn't even unmute myself before I started talking. So clearly I need one more preseason game before I'm ready for the real thing in 2024. But I'm pumped for this season, man. No shortage of storylines. I was just talking. I was doing it on Locked On 49ers. We were doing a Locked On NFL Network NFC West roundtable, kind of getting people ready for the season. And I was thinking back, like, your vibes are kind of weird right now around the 49ers. But last year at this time, we still didn't know where Brock was with his injury. Remember, he was like 2 days on, 1 day off in training camp. Trey Lance, 12 months ago, Trey Lance was still a member of the 49ers. It feels like a decade ago that he was still a member of the Niners. He played the last preseason game, then got traded to the Dallas Cowboys. So it's and Nick Bosa wasn't signed yet. So it's not like it's not par for the course for things to be weird for the 49ers in the offseason, even though it feels like vibes are off right now.
And the vibes are off thing is kind of funny, in my opinion, because people are like, well, all these injuries. Well, if you look around at other teams, you would say their vibes are off. I think this is just how football is. If you ask a Minnesota Vikings fan right now how they feel, they probably don't feel great. They have a lot of injuries. Jordan Addison might be suspended. Their vibes are off. The New York Giants still have Daniel Jones as a quarterback. Their second round, their backup running back is injured. Their vibes are off. The Dallas Cowboys still haven't signed CeeDee Lamb. Their vibes are off. So I think that's why I guess I have a hard time buying into this whole like, oh, why does this always happen to the 49ers? When it's like, if we look around, we could probably pick apart situations where things aren't good for a lot of teams. Look, I mean, I got the Bengals on my screen right now. Jamar Chase doesn't want to play, do anything. Are the vibes off?
Yeah. It's funny because I think the 49ers, there's expectations. I think that's what it boils down to.
Yeah,
because
that makes sense.
Teams that don't expect much still, for some reason, just kind of like wander into the season like, oh, of course, we're going to be a great team. And, again, referencing the podcast I just recorded, and that'll be on our Locked On 49ers feed and the Locked On NFL feed, I think, next week. But it's like the host of the Locked On Rams, Doug McCain. He's great. I love the guy. And, we give each other we rib each other quite a bit because we talk to each other a lot, do crossovers every week before with the opposing team on the network before games. And so I talk to those guys a lot in the West. But they're like, he's like, oh, I really think the Rams are going to win the West. And I'm like, you're out of your mind if you expect that. Like, don't be
based on what?
Don't be putting your money down that the Rams are going to beat the 49ers right now. Especially you look at the Vegas Lions. It's, Niners, no teams within 3 wins for the over-under win totals for the 49ers. Now, it doesn't mean a team can't beat the 49ers and things could absolutely fall apart. But I think 100%. This optimism still reigns for most teams in the NFL, even though there's some weird stuff. I think with the 49ers, it's like, you have to win the Super Bowl. And I feel like everyone's kind of gripping it tight. I think Kyle Shanahan's kind of gripping it tight as well. And anybody who's a Star Wars fan knows if you grip it too tight, things start to slip through your fingers. So you got to be careful for how tight you grip it. It's like the Super Bowl for bust thing is like why the 49ers vibes feel different. I think for some other teams, they're just happy-go-lucky. Oh, good. It's a brand new season. We have no losses yet. We're going to be good. And then they'll fall in a manhole at some point.
Right. If the Minnesota Vikings don't do anything, nobody was expecting anything because they thought Sam Darnold was going to be their starter and they were going to see what's happening with J.J. McCarthy. Right. Like, I think my point overall was it's just the whole, well, the injuries are piling. And it's like, if we look around at many teams, we could look around at situations and say, this looks crazy for them. This looks crazy for them. Fine. It's time. Brian Peacock. Brandon Ayuk is using social media again. And you and I would be remiss in our duties if we didn't talk about what Brandon Ayuk was liking. Brandon Ayuk likes a picture of him in a Washington Commanders jersey. Brandon Ayuk likes a picture of him in a Pittsburgh Steelers jersey. We have to preface this discussion while DeForest Buckner on my screen, 49ers legend, ends the Bengals drive right here. This is the part where it's funny to me because Jahan Dotson gets traded today. Who, by the way, let me just start this. Jahan Dotson wasn't troubling anybody on that Washington Commanders roster. It's not like they
that
traded.
we know of. He moves in silence, unlike Brandon Ayuk. He wants everybody to know. He's being showy about it. Dotson's like letting air out of people's tires in the parking lot, but he's got a mask on. He doesn't want anybody to see what he's doing behind the scenes. It felt like Washington wanted him out of town, right?
And I don't know why they wanted him out of town. I mean, like, if you're the Washington Commanders, you are going to start this season, for all intents and purposes, with Terry McLaurin, Diami Brown. Does this mean that the Nepo baby that we were all searching for, Luke McCaffrey, is the one that's actually pushing people out of the door? But I digress. This is what it is, Brian. Washington gets rid of Jahan Dotson. Is this clearing way for Brandon Ayuk to be a Washington Commander? And why is he still pressing this? And why is this still on August 22nd, 8:12 Eastern Time? That we have no resolution and we have no real actual news other than the things that we know and the things that are happening on social media.
I've kind of stopped paying attention to the social media stuff because it'll make you a little crazy. And I don't want to look too much into it. But just from the standpoint of someone who covers the NFL and covers the 49ers, it just seems like too perfect of a match for Washington and Ayuk. And maybe it's so much. Let me ask you this real quick. Do you think that because the reason Washington is a preferred destination for Brandon Ayuk because his boy is there, right?
Jaden
Daniels, his good buddy from back in their Arizona State
ASU.
days. And it's pretty cool, right? To have your best friend's a NFL quarterback. My best friend's not an NFL quarterback.
I just want to put it real quick. Devontae Adams thought that was going to be really cool for him as well too. So like, I just want to make sure
exactly. Yeah, like going to business with your buddy and find out he's not your buddy anymore. It happens all the time, every day. In this,
it's the college fraternity buddy that you're like, oh, we're gonna put each other on, and then you find out, oh man, you know what? He really wasn't as good, as we thought.
But you know who else might be boys? Adam Peters and John Lynch.
100%.
And do you think there's something to Adam Peters, even though he's one of the people who helped draft Brandon Ayuk in 2020? Do you think there's like a brotherhood there where Adam Peters is like, nope, those are my boys. That's they're. I have too much respect.
I drafted
the 49ers and the organization.
I looked at them.
I'm not going to step on their toes by flirting with their player. So we're out on Brandon Ayuk, even though he's a player that would help our organization. If they want to call us and offer Brandon Ayuk, we'll have a conversation. But I'm not going to hurt them in their process by getting mixed up with the guy they're trying to sign and be like, start flirting with the guy who's on their team.
Do you think that there's a little bit of, because there's such a discussion about who drafted who's responsible for finding this guy, right? What about if Adam Peters is that's my guy, Brandon Ayuk, that's my guy. Right. Like, and now I feel so I despise this conversation just because we don't know for a fact who picks who. Right. You see a pick, it doesn't work. Kyle picked him. You see a pick that didn't work. John picked him. You see a pick, it didn't work. Peters picked him. But then there's all of these hits that we don't necessarily know who exactly was driving this. And what if Adam Peters says, that was my guy. That's the guy I helped you find. Because Kyle could have stopped this whole Brandon Ayuk thing months ago. Really. In my opinion. If everything that he put Brandon Ayuk through, if everything that he wanted from Brandon Ayuk was something that he's turned into, if that's something you want, you could have stopped this. because you stopped it for Trent Williams, and Trent's the GOAT, and we're not done talking about him clearly, but there's something about this that feels like who drafted who's looking at what, and what are you valuing? Because why isn't this done, Brian Peacock?
Yeah, there's clearly a disconnect, and it's funny because Jordan Schultz yesterday or a couple days ago, ESPN was like, "Oh man, it's close. There's this and there's movement.
It's been close for 2 weeks."
He's like, "There's movement." And Kyle Shanahan, the same day.
Breaking news real quick, Brett. Breaking news real quick, BP.
Here we go.
Breaking news real quick. The 49ers have had red zone struggles before we even get into any games because it's been close.
Oh, they can't put the ball over the goal line.
They can't put the ball over the goal line. Here we go.
Right. It's
go for it. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. I just want to get my joke in.
I hope they're not counting on Jake Moody to bring this thing home.
Why'd you do that? Go, Brian. Just talk about like.
I don't even know what I was talking about anymore.
No. It's just we were talking about like it's a Jordan show said it was close.
Yeah, he said there's movement. The same day, Kyle Shanahan's like, nope, nothing to report, nothing's changed. Today, sorry guys, I wish I could tell you something. He's on KNBR. Sorry guys, I wish I could tell you something. Nothing's changed at all. I have nothing at all to tell you about it. John Lynch on KNBR. Nope, sorry, got nothing to tell you. Nothing's changed. Nothing's moving at all. So there keeps being reports that something's about to happen, and then nothing happens, and nothing's actually closer. So I have no idea what to expect. At some point, the Steelers have to move on and get ready for a season. Right. Could Washington get in the mix? I mean, it's a natural thing to expect. It's like, okay, well, clearly the 49ers, because the report was the 49ers were asking for a player along with the pick. So you would think that Jahan Dotson would be a nice fit to go the other way in a Brandon Ayuk trade. So that's why I don't think Washington still would be involved with Brandon Ayuk. For whatever reason, it's not like they like Diami Brown more or anything. I think it's just that they didn't like Dotson. And if they were going to be involved with Brandon Ayuk, Dotson wouldn't have had any effect. In fact, it might have helped a deal go through with the 49ers, unless the 49ers hated Dotson and they wanted a pick instead. And maybe that third rounder goes back to the 49ers somehow now. But I could see why Brandon Ayuk wants him. And I could see why the 49ers would prefer a second round pick from Washington than from Pittsburgh. So the fits work for me. And you would see why Adam Peters would like his old player in Brandon Ayuk over there too. So I like the fits all around. But for some reason, as we know it, Washington is not interested in Brandon Ayuk. Why? I think it might have to do because Adam Peters doesn't want to step on John Lynch's toes in the 49ers.
And I think to put a bow on this, I still think the 49ers and Brandon Ayuk find a way to get this done. And it would be really nice to get this done sooner than later, because tomorrow the 49ers wrap up the preseason and they have a long time. Donnie Mitchell just scored a touchdown. It would have been nice if the 49ers would have drafted him. I mean, just in my head, you know. But speaking of drafted, you know, I sent out a tweet about Roger Rosengarten, right tackle. And I think the crux of my tweet was on how people feel about Colton McKivitz. And, you know, look, I'm talking to the perfect person. The shadow draft guy and all the butterfly effects of like one pick and what one pick means. And 49 fans, you have PTSD because of all of the picks that were sent to, you know, Trey Lance, and now Trey Lance isn't here. What if? Because everybody's worried about Ricky Pearsall right now. While I want to say this, they're very optimistic about this draft class for good reason. For good reason. There's a lot of good football players, it seems like, the 49ers have drafted. Great. We haven't even seen the first round pick play. But Roger Rosengarten is doing pretty well right now in preseason at right tackle. So I'll kick this off to Brian. The question I have is, do you feel better about the Ricky Pearsall draft pick without seeing him play a snap if it was paired with Roger Rosengarten in the back end of the second round? And does that even mean that they draft Dominic Pooney, the starting right guard for the 49ers? Go for it.
There's been a lot of talk about that, because not only Roger Rosengarten looks like he's playing pretty well, and it was 2 picks in front of the 49ers that he was selected, and then obviously the 49ers, well, one pick in front of the 49ers original pick, and then the Niners moved down with the Chiefs so they could go up and get Kingsley Suamataia, which was my guy at that same spot at offensive tackle. And he's winning the left tackle job to protect Patrick Mahomes' blindside for the Kansas City Chiefs. So you got Rosengarten and you got Suamataia that went back-to-back picks right before the 49ers selected at the end of round 2. And then you have your current left tackle holding out if you're the 49ers. Colton McKivitz could clearly be upgraded, even though he gets a bad rap because it's not his fault that he's a kind of under-athletic former fifth-round guy that they thought was going to be a guard and ends up playing okay at tackle and has won the job. And he's tough and he's smart and he looks like he's maybe even better this year than he was last year. Maybe not the ideal player, but that's not his fault, right? And for what he is, he's actually pretty good. And it's pretty cool, the story for Colton McKivitz and how he got to where he is and what he's doing. And he's not the worst tackle in the league, even though you think you could probably upgrade him. And they probably should have had some competition.
He's not the worst right tackle in the league. He's not. Like, listen, 49er fans, look at me and Brian when I tell you this. Colton McKivitz isn't the worst right tackle in football. It can get worse.
I think a lot of fans would be shocked at how bad other teams' offensive lines are.
100%.
Nobody has like awesome, perfect starting 5 offensive linemen. Like there is a dearth of offensive linemen in the NFL that are NFL starting capable.
Yeah, and that's and look, that's the thing, right?
Which is why you draft them, which is why it's frustrating that the 49ers didn't draft any, because you can always use more, especially when you got an older left tackle who's holding out and you got a guy who probably needs some competition on the other side. And it takes a while to develop those guys too. So you got to get in front of that. And the 49ers have just not really put the priorities on their offensive line in the draft, aside from Aaron Banks, second rounder, and then trading for Trent Williams. But we're going to talk about the butterfly effect. Sorry, I cut you off.
No, you're good. No, I think that's you're making my point, Brian. Is everyone loves a 49er team that has Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel and George Kittle and Fred Warner and then you want them to also allocate that money to offensive line. And it's a give or take. Whether you agree or disagree with the philosophy is completely up to you. But Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Fred Warner, Charvarius Ward, Dre Greenlaw, Nick Bosa. Which one of these guys are you willing to sacrifice for something? And Trent Williams is the best left tackle who's ever graced God's green earth at this point. So it's tough for this discussion because everyone wants an upgrade. Everyone wants 5 All-Pros. If they had 5 All-Pros, everybody could have that, and then they would do it. I just don't get it, Brian.
And look, this is, if the 49ers hit on the players they drafted, then it's all gravy. I think the number one rule of drafting is draft good players, and if you hit on guys, you're going to be ahead of the game. But you have to start prioritizing. And if wide receivers and offensive tackles are expensive, you draft them. And they did draft wide receivers. They didn't draft any offensive tackles. Guards are getting more expensive now. Pooney looks like he's a good player in the 3rd round. The 2nd round pick who they ended up taking, and this is no knock on him, like Renardo Green looks pretty good. And guess what?
He does.
They did need some cornerback help for the future as well. So it's, if Green is good, you're never going to knock the pick, but there's some what ifs here. And at some point you got to get yourself some future and present offensive tackles. And there's a reason that it's harder to find offensive tackles than interior offensive linemen in the NFL. And in fact, a lot of the guys the 49ers have drafted that were offensive tackles in college, they move them inside because they're not tackle prospects. They don't have tackle tools. And McKivitz was one of those, even though he ended up playing tackle. And I wonder if Spencer Burford could be the next guy. And since Pooney's winning the job, there's no reason to take Pooney out of the lineup now. I want to see Spencer Burford. And I think I saw it in the chat up there somewhere. Was it Anthony maybe? Or yeah, it was Tony. Tony said that he would ideally like to see Spencer Burford start in the 3rd quarter at right tackle. And I'm with him, man. We need to see, because Burford's more athletically gifted than Colton McKivitz. So if it can happen for Colton McKivitz, maybe Spencer Burford would be a really solid backup, a swing tackle potentially. If he's not going to win that right guard job and it's Pooney's, then let's see Spencer Burford be a super sub and play some other positions. We haven't seen him try to even play tackle in the NFL, but he has offensive tackle traits, more so than Colton McKivitz does. So I would absolutely like to see that for Spencer Burford.
I think the question becomes, Brian, and I think this is not a bad idea by Tony. Shout out to Tony, by the way, big supporter and everything. I don't think that's the craziest thing to see Spencer Burford try that. I guess the question I have for you, Brian, is why did the 49ers not care about Kingsley Suyamata like at all? Yeah, I'm sorry. I have a tough time with names.
Kingsley.
Oh, Kingsley. Yeah, Kingsley is like how I usually. Why did the 49ers not care about him? And what was it about his game that they said, no, we're fine, Kansas City Chiefs that have beaten us in 2 Super Bowls. You could jump us and, send us what you want.
And by the way, the Chiefs jumped the 49ers to draft the same position they drafted a few picks later and got Worthy. Like,
right.
I would have rather had Worthy and Suamataia with the first 2 picks.
So, all right. So let's go.
This isn't to say the Niners should have done it or the players the Niners drafted. It's for Pearsall. It stinks. The guy didn't miss a game for 5 years in college or 6 years. He's in college for a long time and never missed a game. And suddenly he's got 3 injuries. 2 of them were the same injury twice in his first camp and can't get on the field in preseason. And that sets back rookies, right? So we'll see what happens with Pearsall, and he might still be really good. Odell Beckham missed the first 4 games of his rookie season and then went crazy. So it doesn't mean he's not good or that he's injured.
But I think, Brian,
I didn't love the pick at the time, though. So, it's
you knew
some like
you knew.
Okay, I knew what he was skinny.
No, you knew that Odell was better. Odell was better.
Like, I'm not saying he's Odell Beckham, right?
No. What I'm saying, like, there's examples of guys like not playing for a while, but like that's the reason you're kind of just like, oh, it's okay, I'll let him sit. It's just, I would ask this, Brian, do you feel better even without seeing 1 snap of NFL like content from these guys? Do you feel better about Pearsall and Rosengarten or Worthy and Suyamata?
If I could trade, I would for sure take Worthy and Suamataia.
Yeah. I mean, they're playing.
No doubt.
They're playing.
And they're earning starting jobs for the team that just won the Super Bowl. So that says a lot. And that doesn't mean the 49ers guys aren't good or maybe could potentially be better. But, my previous biases for how I graded them in the draft and, and what they've looked like so far, I would go that direction. But I want to take it a step further with the tweet you sent out there about Rosengarten, because it does seem like the 49ers did really like Rosengarten. And if he was there, I think he would have been the pick over Renardo Green. Would they have still traded down with Kansas City to let them go get Rosengarten instead? If the Ravens would have taken Suamataia, I don't know. Maybe the 49ers just grouped them so close together. They're like, we'll take free picks because we like all these guys and we'll take Green. If you take Suamataia, we don't care about it. I think that might have been it. And who knows if the Chiefs take Green. And they could have taken a corner because they lost L'Jarius Sneed free agency. Let's say the Chiefs take Green. I think the 49ers might have been like, oh, yeah, okay, so Suamataia we like too, and he was in that group, and we'll take him instead. So I don't know if they just hated Suamataia or if they just didn't care because they had a grouping of guys that they liked really close together. And they obviously could have traded up too if they loved Rosengarten, so they didn't like him enough to do that, even though it was pretty clear that he probably wasn't going to get to you. And it was actually surprising to me that Suamataia got to where their spot was. And I was like, oh, this is an easy draft pick. And then they traded out of it and didn't get him. And the team that traded in did take him. So anyway, so you said that you believe the 49ers, and I do too, that they wanted Rosengarten. He got snatched
I think so.
In front of them. Ravens GM Eric DeCosta talked about this. And he said he thought that the 49ers liked Rosengarten as well. But he said he thought that the Chiefs liked Rosengarten. And the Chiefs had talked to the Ravens about a trade, and they had kind of agreed on a trade. And then, and this is what's funny, because every team always thinks that the guy they like is the team that the other teams like. And so you watch these post-draft videos of a GM calling teams and trying to move up and get a guy. And Malachi Corley was one. He's a player I liked. He's the next Debo in the last draft. The Jets GM Joe Douglas was calling every team in the world for like an entire round, from the second round all the way to the top of the third round, because he wanted to get his guy. He kept calling teams, but then the guy he wanted wasn't getting drafted. It's like everyone else wasn't fighting to get the same guy you are. And you see all these videos, and they're always, the one team likes the guy a lot, and they think everyone loves the same player. And a lot of times they just don't. And so that was kind of what I felt like when I was listening to Eric DeCosta. He's like, oh, the guy we got is the one that everybody wanted. What I think is that the 49ers and Ravens both liked Rosengarten. And I think the Ravens kind of like Suamataia as well, but they like Rosengarten more. And I think the Chiefs liked Suamataia more than Rosengarten. But I think what happened was the 49ers could have gotten Rosengarten if they didn't trade with the Chiefs. And so get this. This is my conspiracy about the butterfly effect.
I love it. Go for it.
So according to Eric DaCosta, the GM of the Ravens, he was on the phone with the Chiefs and they had a deal worked out and they thought they were going to make a trade and go down a couple of spots. And then at that point, Eric DaCosta said he would have been upset because he would have probably missed out on Rosengarten and Suamataia if they'd have moved down, knowing what he knows now, or knowing what, we all know about it now. But then the Chiefs called back, said, no, we're good. And they ended up doing a deal with the 49ers instead. And here's the thing that I think happened is I think the Chiefs were trying to go up. And once they realized that they could get a deal with the 49ers, it was probably cheaper. So they said, never mind. We like these two tackles. One of them's going to be there for us. And we think the 49ers would take one if we don't take them and move up. We don't have to move up to the Ravens spot because the 49ers are letting us trade up. We know we're going to get one of these tackles. So we're cool now. We're good. And so they said no to the Ravens. And then we see how it played out. But if the 49ers wouldn't have said yes to move down with the Chiefs would have moved up with the Ravens and taken Suamataia, which would have meant Rosengarten was there for the 49ers. So by agreeing to move down, the 49ers made it so they couldn't take their own guy in Rosengarten, because if they would have said no, then the Chiefs would have said yes to the Ravens, but the Chiefs like Suamataia, they would have taken him. Rosengarten would have been there for the Niners. Then the Chiefs would have been sitting there with the last pick after them with the other two guys in opposite order going back to back at offensive tackle right before him. That's what I think would have potentially happened. If the 49ers said no to the Chiefs, they might have actually got the guy they wanted.
And then I would argue this, Brian. Getting Dominic Pooney, does this mean that if the 49ers took Rosengarten in that spot, do they take another offensive line? And right now, good.
No, and if you ask, here's the other thing. So seeing Pooney and seeing how Green has looked good for the 49ers, played well. If you said to 49ers fans, okay, you get Suamataia or Rosengarten, because a lot of them wanted them too at the end of round 2. You get them, but now you don't get Pooney. But instead, you get Pooney. You don't know what door number 3 is going to be. It's a question mark. You still might go up and get Pooney. Maybe since you got an offensive lineman, you don't do that. Maybe you go up and end up with Ronald Green, right? Maybe that's the guy they end up with and they move up instead. Maybe they don't move up at all. You never know what happens there. Maybe you get all of them because each guy actually slides an extra half around to where the 49ers were going to pick already. So who knows? Maybe you end up with all the guys. I would do it. But I think most 49ers fans would say, oh, that means we might not get Pooney. I like the guys we got. I'm not making that trade because I don't know what door number 3 is going to hold. Mm-hmm. I think that's what most 49ers fans would say.
That's the point, right? And there's still a world, 49ers fans that are watching this, and shout out to you guys. We're almost like 30 minutes in here. Make sure you guys like this video, subscribe to both channels, everything, all that. Dominic Pooney could improve Colton McKivitz, and he already has on tape. And Brendel also. It's Brendel now has to play because I think there was much more of a discussion if Feliciano was ready to go. But now Brendel does have to play. But you already saw Pooney in a play say, oh, I need to find work. I'm not going to stand here. I got to go find work. Let me go help. And he spins back and helps. There's a way to look at this and say, okay, I want an upgraded right tackle. But an upgraded right tackle wouldn't mean an upgraded right guard. But does the right guard upgrade mean more to the overall offensive line than an upgrade at right tackle? And this is what's interesting about these discussions when it comes to butterfly effect about, well, we didn't draft this guy. We could have drafted this guy. If the 49ers draft the right tackle, do they go back to the well with the offensive lineman the next round? I would like to. I mean, in a perfect world, I'd love to have Pooney and Rosengarten, but does that mean that that's what they're thinking? And you simply seem like you're sacrificing one for the other. And and you know what's funny is we've gotten into the weeds of the discussion about what's the next pick, and I think that's an important part of it. But the reason that I brought it up was if it was Pearsall and Rosengarten, 1 and 2, because everybody's freaking out about Ricky, do you feel better about, the first 2 rounds than you do with Green? But Green's doing very well. Mustafa's doing very well. Jacob Cowan's showing out now. I think we are excited about a draft class, and we still haven't seen the first round pick show up yet. But it still is interesting to kind of go through the footprints of how this all happened in the draft and figure out how this all came to be. And I still believe deep down in my core, the 49ers were waiting for Rosengarten. You know, I mean, it was all there. The Joe Staley stuff, right tackle, looks like McGlinchey, everything, right? Like we're all talking. You didn't have to take him in the first round. He felt like McGlinchey. McGlinchey gives you baseline. I get that part. But does that mean that you're going to eventually end up with Pooney? And does Pooney give you more of a net positive on this offensive line than an upgrade at right guard? That is the part that I think is to talk about.
And I do think in the end, the next pick after that in the third round would have been either Renardo Green's still there for the 49ers and they get him, or they still move up and get Pooney. So I still think they end up with one of those guys. Right. So yeah. Because look, Renardo Green is as good as he is. He wasn't that highly thought of a prospect. You know, it was the second round version of Pearsall. Not a lot of people had him in the second round.
He fit the 49ers mold. Like right. that was their guy.
He wasn't even a Senior Bowl guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's a good chance he might have gotten to where the 49ers, you know, could have traded up and gotten him at least. And, you know, maybe he does get snatched up and maybe they still go get Pooney because they would have said, well, he's a guard anyway. So we got a guy who can play guard/center in Pooney, and we got a tackle too. And what's funny is, what if Rosengarten or Suamataia right now were playing good in the preseason at left tackle? What would that do to the negotiation with Trent Williams? It'd be like, well, we might have got our tackle in the future, and he's actually looking like he can play now. More than likely, they would have started those guys at guard anyway before kicking him out. But with Trent Williams out, maybe they would have said, okay, well, now you get a chance to work a tackle.
You know, Trent, that's why Trent's like in his bag right now in terms of like, I know exactly what I need to do right now because I've seen what you've done in the draft and everything as well, too. Real quick, I want to toss this to you. Giannis says, Jason, DeCosta said in post-draft presser that they wanted Pearsall in the second round. Did not expect him that high. Maybe Rosengarten pick was payback. What do you think about that? A little get it back?
They're not going to draft the guy just to piss off another team. They're going to draft him if they like him. But the big thing that stood out to me was that they thought Pearsall was a second round guy and not a first round guy. Similar to what the Rams did. Do you remember the Rams didn't have a first round pick for like a decade? In the draft 2 years ago, remember when the Patriots shocked the world at the end of round one and drafted who's the offensive line? Mason. I want to say Mason Cole. It's not Cole. It's Strange.
Cole Strange.
Cole Strange. Thank you. Cole
at the end of the first.
At the end of the first round. And
we thought we were going to get him. We thought he was going to slide to us.
Yeah, they didn't have a pick until the third round. And that was one of the guys like, okay, well, I guess we'll cross him off the list. And they ended up taking a guard in the third round. The Rams did. But they thought, you know, so it's really funny how, and again, that goes back to what I was talking about, where teams like get so worked up in their own draft room and think everyone loves the same players that they love. And teams just have completely different valuations of guys. And so, you know, maybe the very next pick, Pearsall would have been selected. Maybe he would have slipped to the Ravens in round two. I don't think it's likely that he would have gotten that far into round two, seeing the run of wide receivers. But, you know, I don't think people were wrong when they think, you know, the consensus around probably the NFL was that Pearsall was a second round guy. But that stood out to me, too, not because I thought there was payback involved, just because I thought, well, okay, another team saw him closer to how I saw him than how the 49ers saw him.
Yeah, and you know what? I think the draft process is so enamored with where you think they should belong in terms of draft. But if you get a guy and you reach and he's a guy and you know, or you wait and he's a guy, it doesn't really matter where. If you get a guy, you get a guy, right? Like everyone is enamored with like, oh, that was a reach. But if he's an impact player, who cares? You made the right decision. If you wait and you get him in the fourth or fifth round, like the Niners usually do, that's amazing too. But I think everybody looks at it and they say, I wouldn't have done that then. But if the results bear themselves out, then who cares when they were drafted, because it matters. And I think, again, we're just in a spot right now on August 22nd where we haven't seen these guys play any games right now. And now we're just going through what they've done in preseason and what our thoughts were pre-draft and all those things. And, you know, it doesn't help that Ricky Pearsall is just not participating in anything right now. And I think that's what's got this discussion driven, because there's none of the discussion right now on Jacob Cowing in the fourth round. There's none of that. Like at this point, he's played one game. he's up for a week, and everyone was like, "Oh, that looks great." I thought it looked great before that. It's just he wasn't able to show it,
Right.
and now there's this discussion about Ricky Pearsall now because he hasn't been able to be on the field.
And if you just look at just overall the 49ers draft and you don't get to know how it all played out or how everyone went where and whatever, if you said, okay, first round pick, wide receiver, he's dinged up, haven't had much of a chance to see him, so we don't know. We'll put it on the back burner. Might be really good, might be really bad. Who knows? And I tend to think it's a pretty high floor, low ceiling player in Ricky Pearsall. But second rounder looks good. You know, Renardo Green looks good at corner. I think he could be a starting guy. Maybe he'll play inside. Maybe he'll play outside. I like him more as maybe an outside number 2 type corner. It's a good pick in the second round. Dominic Puni looks like a starting guard. It's a great pick in the third round. Malik Mustafa was my favorite pick the 49ers made, and he looks awesome. Looks like a future starter at strong safety. Maybe not as a rookie, but probably at some point in his rookie contract, maybe as early as year 2 if Hufanga ends up moving on. Maybe a starting caliber guy. I mean, that's a good draft already. Like, no takebacks on that. I'm saying yes, please. I will take that, and I'll take my chances on what that first rounder looks like and what the late round guys look like. Just with that second, third, fourth round, I think that's a pretty good draft to have. So we're nitpicking and we're talking about how things could have been, and still got to find an offensive tackle at some point. Those are not easy to find, and if you're not going to draft them in the first or second round, you're going to pay a whole lot of money for someone's scrub ass offensive lineman, right? Like I'm sorry, I don't mean to scrub when it comes to Mike McGlinchey. Apologies to the McGlinchey family, but the Broncos had to pay a lot of money for a Mike McGlinchey level offensive.
And the Niners fans would have lost their mind if they paid that amount.
And that's what you're going to get in free agency at offensive tackle in most cases. It's very rare that you're able to go trade for someone like Trent Williams. That was a really lucky circumstance of events that led him to want to be a 49er, and the 49ers were cool trading for him without a contract in place because he almost got traded to the Vikings, but they didn't want to do the deal without a contract in place, and Trent Williams had a little control over that and wanted to go play with Kyle. So they were lucky that they were able to do that. That's not something you can do a lot. So it's hard to find a tackle. They're not too worried about it. I'm personally a little bit more worried about it. But when you look at the 49ers draft, it looks like a good draft. And that's not even counting what Ricky Pearsall could be, even if he's just, a 2/3 type for his entire career. They hit on some picks. You get a starting safety, you get a starting guard, you get a starting corner in any draft. It's a good draft.
Look at Brian Peacock, the voice of optimism, the beacon of optimism for 49ers fans.
They fucked it up. They could have done a lot better, Jason.
That's what's going to drive the clicks, right? Like we have to not be excited at all, like about anybody at this point. And I love your point about that. Renardo Green looks good. Look at Cowing, even if it's one game. I believed in that pick off the bat. Like I was banging the table, like go double down on wide receiver. Like don't mess around. If he's there, like you have a shot. I don't want to hear about Brendan Rice, who's actually doing really good, and he might be kicking my ass like in a little bit or whatever. And that might end up being one of my freezing cold takes. But when you think about how enthused we are with this draft class, and we haven't seen the first rounder, sounds like we're okay. Like we're on good standing right now, and that is something that 49er fans haven't been able to say for a draft class in a long time, especially looking at the draft class in which Brock Purdy was taken with the last pick. That draft class looks doom and gloom when you look around.
So my thing was that it wasn't so much that this is the argument I get in with the draft, and we can move on to some other stuff. But a lot of what happens in the draft is fans, rightly so, and I understand how fans are, you get attached to the guy that your team picks. And so a lot of the things I see about Ricky Pearsall are, he wasn't going to be there in the second round, and my response to that is always the same. I had the same conversation about the Trey Lance stuff. I was like, why did you trade up from number 12 in the first place? You didn't even know who you were going to take. That was just weird. And I argue with
we're going to 3, and now we're going to do the research.
Yeah, I've argued with fans for years about that, and there's like, you don't know who's going to be there. Someone would have traded up in front of you, and my response is always the same. I don't care. Then you draft a different guy. And that's kind of my thing with Ricky Pearsall. Oh, you couldn't move down, or he wouldn't have been there in the second round. It's like, I don't care. I liked other prospects, and we'll see if Johnny Newton's better. That would have been my pick there. I know Croc's guy was Cooper DeJean, and he liked what he could have potentially been. What if it had been Cooper DeJean and Kingsley Suamataia and then Puni in the third round? Now you got your corner, and then you have Cowing in the fourth round. And, it wouldn't have been a wide receiver early, but you still do have some pretty good wide receivers on this roster. So, there's a lot of different ways it could have gone. and we'll see whose careers are the best. But just in a vacuum, the 49ers draft this year looks like a good one. They got some players, and when they really hit on players is when they get the guys that are wired right. And that's why I do like Pearsall. I think he's competitive, and I think he's going to work his butt off to maximize, and which he already has, I think, maximized his ability. He's going to get what he can out of his body. Kyle Shanahan's comment about him knowing how to be a pro already, I think goes a long way into him saying that he's probably not going to have a stay in the doghouse as long as he can get healthy and get on the field, which bodes well for Ricky Pearsall. And we've seen the competitiveness already from Pooney. We've seen the competitiveness from Malik Mustafa. We've seen the competitiveness from Renardo Green. And that's when the 49ers hit on guys rather than chasing, positions or chasing. They do draft for need a little bit. This regime does, as we've seen with like punter and kicker and some other positions. But they've hit on the guys in their draft class. They've hit on guys that are wired that way, and I think they hit on a lot of those guys in this draft class. So this class alone, I'm liking what I'm seeing from the 49ers draft, and that's without Pearsall, their first rounder.
All right, so let's talk about what needs to be seen in the 49ers Raiders game. And the running back room is interesting, and I love to talk to you about it. It's in the same way that somebody will say to me, "Oh, I'd love to talk kickers with you," right? Isaac Guerendo is going to get a lot of run here. And I have this question. I don't think you're going to be able to pass Isaac Guerendo on the practice squad without anyone taking a shot on the young man. I also doubly have a hard time seeing that the 49ers move him to the practice squad after they traded up to get him. So, this running back room, Christian McCaffrey, Elijah Mitchell, Jordan Mason, Isaac Guerendo, and Kyle Juszczyk, Brian Peacock. Is this where we are?
That's it. That's the only way you can go unless you trade Elijah Mitchell before the season starts. And then you bring up, to be honest with you, I thought Matt Breida looked better than Cody Schrader. I'm rooting for Cody Schrader. He's under athletic. There's no burst there.
It's a double-edged sword, I think, a little bit, Brian, too. It's like he's not getting the blocking like when he's out there, and also I'm not seeing the vision also. Like I it's a little bit of both.
Yeah, he's not creating. There's no burst. There's no there's a lot of running backs, even if you don't have top speed, you've got that short area burst, the short area quickness. So he's not big, so he doesn't have a lot of power, and he lacks juice. Where you see Mason run, and Mason's not a speed demon either, but he's got some juice to him. He's got a burst. Elijah Mitchell has a burst. You see Matt Breida come in the game after Cody Schrader, and he just looked like a completely different athlete than Cody Schrader. So I'm not huge on Cody Schrader. I think he's someone that, he plays hard. He runs some routes. He can catch the ball. He can be a backup for you. I didn't see much out of him as a returner either. He got a couple shots doing the kickoff return. I think he's your classic going to the practice squad guy.
Practice squad.
Breida, you could probably do practice squad with Matt Breida too, or make sure, maybe you want to trade somebody in that case. But I don't see
I think Breida lives on the practice squad and gets away with it. I think someone would take a shot on Cody.
You're not worried about cutting him, and then if he doesn't get to the practice squad, someone else picks him up. You're not hurt by it. So there's no way they're going to cut Guerendo. So Guerendo's running back 4 might not even have a jersey on game days, unless he wins a job on special teams. Really, it's similar to Jacob Cowing. And so when Jacob Cowing was dinged up, Guerendo was dinged up, I thought, oh, maybe they just stash these guys and put them on IR, and maybe they have some other injuries and they can have them return during the season, or maybe they just put them on season-ending IR and do the red shirt thing with these guys so they can keep other players and keep other numbers at other positions. But now that both those guys are healthy, then you're not going to stash them unless they make up a fake injury and still stash those guys. For Cowing, he might be the punt returner. So now he's got a jersey on game days. I don't know if Guerendo is going to have a jersey on game day. He might be running back 4 and then just be, hanging out in street clothes while Mason and Mitchell and Christian McCaffrey are the guys that suit up.
That's the thing, is me saying Guerendo makes his 53-man roster doesn't mean that he's going to be an impact player. I think if you traded up for the guy, and you know what? Maybe the 49ers will do what I don't expect them to do. which is cut bait on a guy that they really love, like right off the bat, maybe.
It's not going to happen, man. 4th round pick.
Right. And they traded
he's
up.
going on IR or he's making the roster. That's it.
Right. So they traded up. And I have a hard time. Well, you know what? The redshirt thing is a lot more likely for him than Pearsall, in my opinion. The redshirt thing is way more likely for Garendo than Pearsall. Because if you redshirt Pearsall, that's going to have a cascading effect on your wide receiver room. So let's just like real quick run through the 6. Ayuk, Samuel, Jennings, Pearsall, Cowing, and Conley. That's how I see the 6.
Easy.
Yeah. Easy. I think that's. I don't even think that's much of a discussion. Like, don't bring up Trent Taylor.
And people probably think that Conley's on the bubble. To me, he's a lock.
What? He's a lock?
He's a lock with no Ayuk around. Maybe with Ayuk back, you can get through 1 week. You can cut Conley and then bring him back because teams don't want the veteran contracts to be guaranteed. And if you make the roster and you're a veteran player, it's going to be guaranteed for the season. So you see some veterans get cut and the team lets them know, look, we're going to sign you back after the first week of the season. So maybe you could see that with Conley if Ayuk comes back in time. But Conley's not only going to make the roster, he's going to start if Ayuk's not out there in
at
week.
X.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. How brave of you, Brian Peacock, to say that Chris Conley's going to start at X instead of Juwan Jennings, because, oh my goodness, the pushback I've gotten just even talking that statement. Juwan Jennings cannot play X. This is the point. This is why you need Chris Conley.
Yeah, and you can tell by how Juwan Jennings got paid. He's a really good role player in his role, and he could start. I mean, they might open up the game with him on the outside, but when they go to 3 wide, Jennings is going to be his role in the big slot spot, and Conley would be the guy on the outside. You might even see Cowing rotated in, but at this point, that's an easy 6. I think it's locked up at the wide receiver spot. The question I have is, okay, so even if you were going to stash some of these guys on IR, or even if you have some guys you're going to put on IR and create some spots, if you want them to be able to come back, they have to make the opening day roster before you put them on IR. So you don't get the extra spot until you do all your cuts to get down to 53 first. So if you wanted someone like Cowing or Garendo to come back, or Ricky Pearsall to come back and put them on short-term IR, they still have to make the roster first. So you can't gain that roster spot. So if Ayuk's still holding out and where do you, or holding in, because he's not on a I'm not here list. He's holding in, right? At some point you got to do something with him. Then you start talking about, okay, well, we got to bring Robbie Chosen, or you got to bring Trent Taylor. You got to start bringing another wide receiver with you potentially. And where you're going to start losing players at other positions. So I wonder if, and deadlines make deals, Jason, is cut down day that day where the 49ers have to get a deal done with Brandon Ayuk, because if they don't, they're losing a roster spot because they have to keep a spot for a guy who's not going to be out there potentially in week 1.
That's what's so interesting about all this, because there's guys who have been injured that I feel were on the roster bubble that now you somehow now have a path to being still kept around, like Ambry Thomas, and obviously there's other guys that might be banged up. Feliciano was a lock for the 53. I'm not going to talk about him in that way, but there's definitely a way to finagle all this. And I think the way that you're building this roster has a cascading effect on other positions. So I think ideally they'd love to get this Ayuk thing done. But if they don't, Chris Conley's the only person that is fitted to play the X position, because he's fast enough. And let's get, you were going to say something?
I mean, I'm old enough to remember when a guy at Jason Aponte 2103 said that Jacob Cowing ran 28 of his 30 routes on the outside.
He did, but 28 of his 36 routes on the outside, 8 in the slot. The question is, who does Kyle trust off the bat? And I think in the beginning, it'll be similar to a 2019 Deebo Samuel situation, which Kyle loved Deebo, but Kyle didn't throw Deebo out there immediately. He had to work his way into it. But I think if you're just talking about from a typical base offense situation, it would be Chris Conley at the X. And I think right now, I mean, all you can ask of Jacob Cowing is to be sprinkled in certain situations. You like a matchup, you have him out there like in certain spots where you feel like you can get an advantage and throw the ball to him. I think that's fine. But if you're asking me of who's left between Ronnie Bell, Robbie Chosen, Trent Taylor,
Tay Martin,
Danny Gray, Tay Martin. Tay Martin has a shot to stick around on the practice squad, I think, in my opinion.
Although it's been 2 years, this is year 3. It's like if you're not going to make the team,
right?
You're not going to make the team. So
I think
I don't know.
I think it would be Robbie Chosen is the guy that you end up like running with like in a pinch of this 6 and saying he's at least played the game of football. He's at least played the game of football under Kyle Shanahan's system, you know, him being in Miami. And he's somebody that we could like in God help us, knock on wood, any situation we have to throw in there. You still kind of feel okay about. But Trent Taylor has no business being on this roster. I think it's done with Ronnie Bell. That was a fun little thing. Danny Gray, whatever, find your way somewhere else. I still think that Kyle's going to lean on his veteran, and he's going to say that Robbie Chosen's the guy.
Yeah, I could see that too, and that's probably the dark horse. And I do think when they signed Robbie Chosen, it was very much Brandon Ayuk insurance. So that's kind of the dark horse guy. We'll see what he looks like if he gets some run here in preseason game number 3. And I think Chosen would. How early he gets into the game, what he looks like out there. Could he be the guy, the dark horse to start in place of Brandon Ayuk if he's still
maybe he could play X?
Yeah, absolutely.
Over Juwan.
Yeah, game downfield.
There's 2 guys on this roster that could be X's over Juwan Jennings. Just because a guy's the number 3 receiver on the team doesn't mean that he can play certain positions.
Yeah, it's not a Madden depth chart where you just go from 3 to 2 automatically.
Right.
And Jennings could do some things too in 2 wide receiver sets. It's not like he couldn't possibly do it, but I just think that he's too good in his role as a big slot, especially when they go into 3 wide receivers. And for Cowing, I mean, can you imagine Kyle Shanahan putting any sort of an emphasis on a rookie wide receiver in week 1 and a guy that missed time and the timing that he wants things to run?
He didn't even do it for the guy he loved in Debo in week 1. That's the thing is he loved Debo. That was his guy.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't see that. I can't see that again for this. That's why if you think I'm banging the table for Robbie Chosen to get here, I'm just putting myself in the mind of how Kyle looks at things and what it would be again for just week 1. Because week 2 can completely change and you get guys up and down and you have guys off the right. Like if we're just talking solely Monday Night Football against the Jets, if Brandon Ayuk is not there somehow, I think Robbie Chosen is the guy that takes that 6th spot while they designate Brandon Ayuk as whatever he is.
Do you have it's been a while since we've talked. We haven't done the Aponte and Peacock or the Peacock and Aponte pod.
Peacock and Aponte sounds better.
I kind of like Aponte and Peacock, especially when you're playing a home team. I don't mind it.
Okay.
I don't mind going second. They both have a ring to it. Luckily, we got that. We got those types of names.
Peacock, but the P over the A, like it goes. It's way better. Whatever. I feel like we're just it's semantics right now. I think it's good.
I'm fine with that. But my question to Jason Aponte would be like, what's your take on Brandon Ayuk? When's it going to happen? What's the holdup? What exactly is going on? Do you think the trades were all just a lark by, the 49ers to try to, or the whole trade stuff was just wrestling around leverage? Because clearly Brandon Ayuk wasn't going to go to Cleveland. He wasn't going to go to New England, and you're not a free agent. And so the 49ers could just say no to any of the other deals. And so, if the Steelers don't want to pony up, if Washington doesn't want to pony up, then there's not much that Brandon Ayuk can do about that. So what do you think is the end game in all this? When? How much money? Is it a trade? What's going to happen here?
Brian, we've had these situations before where negotiations have gone long. There is something about this situation by itself that feels completely different from Deebo Samuel, Fred Warner, George Kittle, Nick Bosa. Even if we knew that Deebo Samuel asked for a trade and all those things happened, right? This is the strangest thing that I have encountered. And that's saying something covering the 49ers, right? This is the strangest thing that I've encountered because everything that's logical in your mind, right, says that there's no way that the San Francisco 49ers on August 22nd, when we are on the doorstep of the season starting, would trade somebody for picks that will be recouped next season, and then you'll have to figure out who you like from that draft. When if you really were pressed in that idea, you should have done that during the draft when you had a chance. And you could have moved up and you could have got yourself your right tackle, your right guard, your wide receiver, whatever it is that you want. This still feels like the weirdest situation I've ever seen, and I still think the 49ers still get this done, and I don't know why. I don't know why, Brian. I still think they get this done, and if the rumors are true that the 49ers have offered $30 million to overcap, then what are you waiting for, Brandon Ayuk?
I have a take on that, on what's going on with at least the negotiation side of things. And somebody in the comments earlier said, Ayuk trying to get year 4 guaranteed, which no teams do. I don't think that Brandon Ayuk's necessarily trying to get year 4 guaranteed, but I think it was Mike Garafolo that reported that there was some holdup in year 4 of this, and that the 49ers might have offered $30 million per year. This is kind of what I think is happening from those reports. I think what the 49ers did was try not to throw a contract out there that has a bunch of funny money. And the 49ers don't really do a lot of that. They've been
void years.
They've been using void years recently, but they don't do the thing where there's like a $60 million final year of a contract, right? Like Devontae Adams' contract right now is really funky, and it's going to start hitting one of those big years, which means something's going to happen with the contract or he's going to get cut. And I think what happened is the 49ers, whatever their original offer was, they probably just threw the same offer. They're like, all right, you want $30 million a year? You want to go win this deal? You want the vanity money? You want your agent to be able to say, hey, we got a $30 million per year contract. Okay, here's the same deal we've been offering for the first 3 years, and here's BS money on year 4. Go ahead. And now the 49ers can say, hey, we offered him $30 million a year. I don't know what he wants. And they don't like that. They want a legit $30 million per year contract. I don't think the 49ers are offering it. That's what I think is happening with this 4th year thing.
Do you think that, and we'll do this real quick, and I'll pivot real quick because I'm going to give you a little bit of a lightning round in terms of, we're going to do position groups, 53-man before we get into this game. Is Brandon Ayuk a San Francisco 49er week 1, ready to go, lined up, and starting at X?
On the field and signed? Yes, but it's like 55-45.
Hey, 55-45 is all you need. It's still majority. It's still a good look. And, never mind. I'm going to keep that to myself. All right, real quick. Tight ends. Okay. Logan Thomas comes back on a 1-year deal.
Mm-hmm.
George Kittle, Soybert, locks.
Yep.
Braden Willis, lock. That's 3. Cameron Latu, are you looking for a job or are you on the practice squad?
He's not even on the practice squad. He's on a different roster.
I think so as well too. And I think someone else is going to take a chance on his college football acumen and where he was drafted.
Somebody 100%. Like him potentially in the draft. Maybe Adam Peters. Who knows? We'll find out. What if we find out that all the bad picks were Adam Peters?
That's like this is the best part about this situation. It's just like that's a Peters pick. It's like Peters is the one that said that he loved Ambry Thomas. You guys like literally don't want him on his roster anymore.
Peters is like, I'm not interested in Brandon Ayuk, but hey, I hope you guys cut Danny Gray and Cam Latu. We can bring them in.
All right, let's go lightning round a little bit further. Linebacker. Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, Devondre Campbell. That's your 3. Curtis Robinson, Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles. Ooh, where are we going here with this? Batoon has been good too.
I like Batoon. I think you might be able to sneak him onto the practice squad. But if you said, hey, Batoon's not going to make it to the practice squad, he's going to get claimed, I would cut Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles. But I don't think the 49ers are going to do that.
I don't think they are either. And all right. So I wrote an article today.
I think Graham is the most interesting one because I don't really see what path to him being valuable to the 49ers is. So I think they would be willing to cut him and probably want to bring him back to the practice squad. But I just see Robinson and Winters and Flanagan-Fowles, and obviously once Dre Greenlaw comes back, there's not really a role for for Jalen Graham. So I think he's the odd man out here. And I think Bethune, like maybe if they could, maybe since Drake Greenlaw's out, they can keep one of those two guys. I personally might lean toward even Bethune over him, but that means the 49ers kind of have too many middle guys, and Graham can't play that strong side role. So maybe that saves him, but Demetrius Flanagan-Foles can too. So you're not going to keep him over him. I don't think the 49ers will. So I think maybe the surprising odd man out, and I know he has a lot of fans and he's looked good in some preseason action.
Curtis Robinson?
No, Graham. I think Graham would be the odd man.
Graham. Yeah.
I think Robinson he's too good on special teams, and I think he's probably the second best middle linebacker.
Yeah. BA wants a no doghouse option. Thanks for the super chat, Steven. But that's what I'm talking about. I wrote an article talking about this, and who I want and who I'm putting myself in the mind of Kyle Shanahan and his roster is completely different. So Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles has been on this team for how long? Curtis Robinson was a guy that they tried to have on this roster 2 years ago, and they found a way to kind of sneakily, like, this is the part where you're like, oh, this person's playing better than this person. That's fine. But what are they going to do when it comes down to, oh, well, we know DFF when we need him in a pinch, like he's a special teams guy, cool. We like this. Like, do the 49ers choose familiarity over upside, over potential? And I don't know if they do in certain aspects.
I think it would be easier for the 49ers to cut a veteran player and go with all the young backups if Drake Greenlaw wasn't already hurt.
100%. And this is what makes the linebacker thing weird. There is no linebacker 3. There is like Oren Burks is not walking through that door. I'm just joking. Like, obviously.
Is he walking through the door?
No, he's not. He's not. He's on another team. Like, someone else was like asking for his services.
And you just have to ask yourself with each guy, who does it hurt to lose if they're claimed or picked up? And I don't think it hurts the 49ers if Jalen Graham is claimed.
The linebacker spot is going to be interesting. Let's do defensive line real quick.
Okay.
Real quick. Okay. Nick Bosa, maybe. Might make the team. Leonard Floyd, Javon Hargrave, Malik Collins, Jordan Elliott, Yetur Gross-Matos, Alex Barrett?
There's the first 6 are the locks, because that's where they're going to follow the money there.
Yeah.
In depth, it gets kind of ugly on that defensive line. Got to be honest.
T.Y. McGill,
I'm a little bit worried about T.Y. McGill.
Kevin Givens.
He bounced around too, though. Like, the 49ers were able to pick him up because he got cut from his other team, and nobody really cared.
I would ask you this, Bryant. What do the 49ers value? Okay, so your defensive line right now, I would say, is probably the least deep that it's been, for a while.
Yeah.
Do you value interior guys or edge guys? Alex Barrett's an edge guy. He's been looking really good. Do you believe that Yetur Gross-Matos is good enough to kick inside, alleviate some of those issues with you, because then you can run another edge rusher out there, with someone else? But the defensive line becomes now more of a what are you valuing thing, and I am so interested to figure out how they figure out this defensive line.
They need, Robert Beal has not been impressive at all. I don't love him against the run. Drake Jackson's already done for the year. You need depth on the edge. And so someone's got to make it. And at this point, I guess it's Barrett is the next best guy. So he kind of has to make the team, right? I think they would trust him playing snaps more than Beal right now, even though Beal was the guy who jumped in first. If I'm not mistaken, it was Beal and YGM who started.
Or Jonathan Garvin.
Yeah. It gets pretty ugly.
I would say Barrett. Over Jonathan Garvin.
Yeah. And then on the interior, Kalia Davis hurt.
T.Y. McGill, Kevin Givens. What do you do?
Givens,
what do you?
They love Givens. Givens will make the team. And I
he's
can
gonna
see
make the team
as well. Yeah. So I think that's it. That's the other 4 is McGill and Givens and Barrett and Beal. That gives you 10. They carry 10 usually, right? Or do they only carry 9?
9 or 10. Like, let's just say, like, let's just go off of like how they've done it. And I'm glad that you said 9, because now we're gonna finish this out with this perfect one. Offensive line. So let's just assume perfect world, perfect sitting. Trent Williams is there. Aaron Banks is fine. His pinky's okay. Jake Brendel's got to start because Feliciano's injured. Feliciano makes it, so we're at 4. Pooney's your starter. McKivitz, so we're at 6. Nick Zakelj, Jared Kingston. Jalen Moore makes it. Jalen Moore makes it just based on the fact that you need someone who can like play left tackle. God forbid.
Jalen Moore is a lock right now. Are you kidding?
Yes, 100%.
So Williams, Banks, Brendel, Pooney, McKivitz. That's probably the starting 5. Should be.
Yep. That, like, God willing, that's gonna be what it'll be week 1.
Jalen Moore has to make it whether Trent Williams is figured out or not.
Makes it. That's 6.
Yeah. Feliciano's on the roster but hurt, but he's
7.
Got to make the roster first before they do something, unless they want to put him on IR for the season or something like that. So that's 7.
I don't think 7.
And then Burford, he got
8.
hurt. I think he's good enough to make the team, even if he doesn't
8.
start over Pooney. So that's 8. And then it becomes Zakelj versus Barch. The 49ers love Zakelj for some reason. And I don't really.
Jack Kingston's going to the practice squad. Like, let's just make sure that
practice squad candidate.
Practice squad is Nugent and Kingston.
And that's another reason why Spencer Burford needs to play tackle, because we only have 3 tackles, and one of them's Trent Williams that we've named so far. So
I'm very interested.
Tackle. There's Chris Hubbard and
Hubbard is that. That's what I was going to bring up.
Yeah, Hubbard and Parker, but I'd probably rather have Spencer Burford be a super sub and be that 4th tackle as well as being an interior guy.
Hubbard is the one that I'm kind of.
I don't see it. Zakelj, especially at guard, maybe he's a little better at center. I haven't really seen it ever with Zakelj from his college tape through any of his 49ers work. He looked okay at center. How many centers do you need to take with you? If Feliciano's hurt, you need a backup center. So maybe that saves Zakelj, and he's your number 2 center to start the year.
Hubbard's the one that I kind of keep going back to, because I just feel like, again, we're talking about veterans, and if God forbid you're in a pinch, and Hubbard was fine, like in Tennessee. Like, I don't want to make it seem like the 49ers unearthed this gem of like a player that nobody was looking at. I think he's a very fine player in this league. And I think that's something that needs to be said on its own. Hubbard is the one that I keep coming back to, where I'm just like, I don't think the 49ers would let him walk, because they've done it before with what was the guy's name last year that he was just on the roster. Like, he never played, but they kept him around because he was a veteran. I think he was on the Raiders the year before. I'm just his name is escaping me. But that's how little he played.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about, and Hubbard is this year's version of him. I know exactly.
I think that's what I'm talking about, right? So I think Hubbard is one of those guys that I keep looking at where I'm just like, I have a hard time seeing them getting away from them. So it comes down to Zakelj, Kingston, Nugent. I don't think Brandon Parker is going to make this team. That's fine. Parker can move, like, whatever. It's fine, I think, at this point. But this is the problem with the 49ers roster, is whoever you try to throw on the practice squad and try to get through, there's teams waiting for you to make your move so they can steal guys. And again, that's just based on the 49ers track record of finding guys wherever they found them, whether it's in the draft, undrafted, whatever, free agents, things like that, that you're not going to be able to keep everybody, and someone's going to find their way on another roster. And I think that's just a tribute to how good the 49ers have been building this team.
And it's another reason why you got to find some roster spaces, because you can't have guys like Brandon Ayuk taking up a spot, but they're not going to play. So you got to cut an extra guy from another spot too. And so it starts to get a little bit dicey there. But I think the 49ers will be all right. They're a deep enough football team. D-line worries me a little bit depth-wise. Offensive line worries me a little bit, although Moore has made me feel a little better about it. And the emergence of Pooney means that now Feliciano can be that backup guy when he's healthy. So that makes me feel better about the offensive line depth as well. Just got to have Trent Williams back, and you're good.
Yeah, I mean, no big deal. Just get the greatest left tackle in football, get him back, get one of the best man separators back on the team. I think, if the 49ers listen to us a little bit more, this would have been done a long time ago, but I don't think that the higher ups are as excited to give out the money.
Nobody putting pressure on Brandon Ayuk and Trent Williams because they're like some young star player that's like, oh yeah, I was drafted high, and guess what? I'm ready to start now. And so maybe you don't need me around. In fact, it's probably strengthened their position with the 49ers not drafting an offensive tackle and having their first round wide receiver banged up.
Hey, I think that's a perfect spot to end this, man. Again, 49ers Raiders tomorrow's going to go a long way into deciding who's going to make this 53-man roster. There's going to be plenty of talk about who makes this roster. We're going to have a whole week from Friday to decide, like, you know, what this is going to be. And when they do make their talks, it's going to be past there because the 49ers don't even play on the first Sunday of football Sunday. So, of course,
this is an agonizing wait after this preseason game. It's agonizing. You know what's going to help you get through, though, is Locked On 49ers Daily.
Oh, yeah.
Jason, and I just put the link in the chat, too, because Croc and I about ready to go live right now. So jump on over to Locked On 49ers. Croc and I will take you through it. We'll jump into some of your questions that we didn't touch here with Peacock and Aponte, which I always have fun doing with you, Jason. I've been bummed we haven't been able to work this out the last few weeks. We had a lot going on.
It's a better name. It's just a better name. Like, you have to get your ego out the way and just say, this is a better name. This is what I'm running with.
We should add a bunch of numbers after the Aponte, though.
I mean, if you put Aponte 210308 to I used to love Kobe back in the day too, or whatever. Like, but no, look, shout out to all you guys, man. Over 290 people in here. Make sure you guys like this video, subscribe to both channels. You know, Brian does great work on his channel. You know, shoot me a sub as well too. Likes help us out a lot with the algorithm right now. Again, he's about to go live with Croc, so I know you guys aren't going to miss that. I know I'm about to just lay down and just pop that on as well too, and jump in the chat and send some snarky remarks.
Yeah, love it. Absolutely. At BD Peacock, at Jason Aponte 2103. Subscribe to Jason Aponte's channels. Subscribe to Overtime with Brian Peacock, OT with BP, and of course, Locked On 49ers Daily, talking about your San Francisco. Oh, and the Peacock and Williamson NFL show. Myself and Matt Williamson, former NFL scout, we cover the entire NFL, the entire league daily on the Locked On Podcast Network. So no shortage of Peacock in the podcast world right now.
100%. And thank you guys again. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday night. There's a lot of football still on. But for Brian, for Jay, we're out of here. Welcome, everybody. Let's go Niners. My name is Jason Aponte.